Have you ever had an experience that traumatically haunted you for like the rest of your life for no apparent reason and affected truly no one else but yourself? Or maybe you experienced something kind of like myself that happened like 15 years ago and still haunts you to this day, like the time I didn't quite make it to the bathroom in time and I shit my pants in middle school. But I was honestly told that should happen to everyone, so I shouldn't be embarrassed about it and it shouldn't be traumatic, okay? So we're all good. I shouldn't feel bad about it, right? Well, this is basically my experience with dihydroboldenone, or better known as DHB in the community that we're in, who simply can't say the full name of compounds and uses acronyms to fulfill the need of explaining what they're using. You see, in my youth, I was really into the idea of using exotic compounds that other people weren't using because in my mind, I thought that that is where results lied. If I could get stuff that no one could get and use it plus abuse it, I would get better results. Why did I think that? I have absolutely no clue. Moving on.
I knew exactly what to do, but in a much more real sense, I had no idea what to do.
So as a kid, I think I was actually 21 years old at this point. I had just won my pro card naturally in the PNBA as a natural competitor and done my first cycle. And yes, DHB was a part of the second half of my first cycle. I mean, we never really come off anyways, so these are kind of just one unit of cycle. But I took it pretty quickly in my bodybuilding career. First red flag.
All right, I know that sounds bad.
And in this video, my intention is entirely just to explain my experience with DHB. I'll get into a little bit of science.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's science.
But more so just in general, my experience. And ideally, the grace of YouTube is going to allow you to see this at some point in your algorithm before you take DHB and cause hectic ass issues with your health. And in my book, that's honestly a win and kind of all I try to do on this channel. And I think one of the reasons that DHB became such a popular compound in the lore of bodybuilding is because of a couple of reasons. One, probably because of its touted effect, supposedly stronger than trenbolone. It gets you vascular and it makes you look like you've never looked before, all at a seemingly lower dose. But I mean, if this was the case, we could just simply ask, well, wouldn't every bodybuilder be taking this if it was that powerful? And yes, you're right, every bodybuilder would be taking this if it was that powerful, and yet seemingly no one at the upper ranks of bodybuilding who's been doing this for a decade plus has used DHB. Some people in those upper ranks haven't even tried or scoffed at even thinking about using DHB. And yet all the newbies, like myself in the time that I was doing it, did take it thinking that this was the answer, this was the unique feature that I was going to do that no one else could do and would uniquely provide me some substantial results.
Hey, that's pretty good.
So before I jump into my own personal story, I want to give a little bit of a background on DHB and what specifically it is, its pharmacokinetics, dynamics, and generally how you should consider it as a drug or user of drugs at all. So dihydroboldenone, or DHB, is also known as 1-testosterone or 1-dihydroboldenone. It has many different names. It was an anabolic steroid derived from boldenone. It's just a simple derivative or actually a metabolite of boldenone. And unlike any part of the compounds that we use, because boldenone is a unique compound in and of itself, yet this is a metabolite of that unique compound, its effects are sort of untracked. We don't really have good data on the expressions that it puts forth, nor do we see in any sort of long-term, I mean, generally with all anabolic steroids, we don't see this, but any long-form term of like practical application study and clinical data, we don't see this stuff because it is such a niche and very nuanced compound. It is, again, a metabolite of an illegal drug that is used in horses and not necessarily something that humans should be putting into their ass. But uniquely, it doesn't aromatize into estrogen, unlike its parent hormone equipoise, and it doesn't seem to have any abnormal DHT-like effects. Dihydrotestosterone being that you might lose your hairline, you could develop acne, you could get other forms of excessive masculinity or secondary male characteristics as a male, but more profound ones. So like all the anabolic steroids we generally talk about, except the 17-alkylated ones, DHB is administered intramuscularly through a depot, and that their intramuscular injection, just like all of them, disperses itself through your blood serum, then getting to the liver and then metabolizing itself, going up the stool eventually to where, yes, you literally shit out the androgens you're taking. And again, I'm sorry this is very vague because genuinely, we have zero research on this kind of stuff. It's very, very, very vague, even in the research that we do have. So the speculations of my speculation is kind of what you're hearing.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation calls
for speculation.
And the pharmacodynamics are very similar to every other androgen as well. Based on what we know, it binds to the androgen receptor, causes a nuclear reaction, which causes muscle protein synthesis. Good deal, you build some muscle. And again, something along that line in the dynamics is what's causing a unique effect from dihydroboldenone, which is an accurate assessment of it, momentarily at least, which we'll get into here in a second. But the dihydroboldenone doesn't seem to cause any excessive amounts of water retention. In fact, can cause a little bit of a dryness to one's skin texture. And for, again, some odd reason, you get a certain degree of vascularity with this compound. This is complete bro science, I'll admit it.
Yes, science!
But it is something that's notable and touted across many different people who've used it out there on the interwebs. So like I was saying before, the biggest problem with dihydroboldenone is that the research done on it is very speculative. We have some animal research, like literally a handful of studies, which are very inconclusive and highly speculative. There is no human data, and we're just sort of pissing in the wind with what we think dihydroboldenone might do based on people's anecdotal effects and their representative lab work, which unfortunately most of the bodybuilding community, imagine that, doesn't do lab work. So we don't actually know what the fuck is happening to people taking this stuff beyond the guys who do their lab work and do test things and have split testing, like myself, like Steve, all of us kind of here in Thailand. And that is really what I want to get into, because it's the only representable research you're going to be able to find as someone who's interested in taking dihydroboldenone. Or hopefully you aren't and you're just watching this for educational purposes only, because that's what I do on YouTube. All of this is for educational purpose only. YouTube, don't nuke me.
Release the Kraken!
I'm not trying to influence people to do bad things, okay? So let's get into my background about what I did that, I guess, caused me to have such an aversion to DHB, and I would encourage you to have the same aversion. Once upon a time, there was a little Kolton, and he was about 21 years old. He just won his pro card in a natural bodybuilding division, and he thought he was the absolute shit. This guy was walking around every single gym, grunting 856 times on a leg press, trying to look the most masculine he could in any single setting, with a really robust hairline, taking a decent amount of androgens for the first time ever, and he was having a great time. But this was very, very limited because of the inadequate understanding of pharmacokinetics dynamics, and as well the array of simple pharmacology that we do have is available to us as bodybuilders. And so DHB came around the conversation in group chats and what have you in the bodybuilding community, and DHB was a really hot topic at the moment between us, because everyone was talking about how it was what they were taking, and suddenly like they had these extremely ridiculous results and it made them feel unreal. And so I thought, well, if this is such a unique compound and I've done research on it, I did research back then, believe it or not. It was very shit research, but it was research nonetheless, and there was nothing on it. So I figured, well, if no research has been done, very few people are likely taking this. Everyone in the group chat's telling me that, hey, this is a unique thing that you're not going to be able to get most often, and you're probably never going to see it again, so you might want to do it now. So I'm thinking, hey, there's no harm, no foul. I'm going to fucking pin some more shit in my ass and call it good. Well, here's where in lies the problem, because no one told me that DHB has an extremely high molecular weight and causes an extremely bad reaction upon entering that intramuscular layer of your body. You see, the post-injection pain caused from DHB was unlike anything I've ever experienced. And not only that, you could taste the byproducts in the oil, in the carrier oil, upon injecting it. I mean, my mouth smelled like tea tree oil immediately after injecting it. I could taste it, I could feel it in my lungs, my lymph nodes would actually get inflamed post-injection. And then, what was even worse was the PIP following that. I would not be able to walk for a solid 2 days in a consistent manner. I mean, I would look like I have cerebral palsy, and thank God I do have cerebral palsy, so I can just tell people who ask me why I'm limping, I'm fucking disabled and I have cerebral palsy, so it kind of works out for me. But for you, maybe not so much. This shit has some insane PIP. And here's the funny thing about this. A lot of people are like, oh, well, my supplier makes it in a way that doesn't give me PIP. Bullshit. It actually just causes PIP because of its molecular weight and how it's structured as a molecule. It's going to cause PIP no matter what your supplier does, or no matter how much they dilute it. If it doesn't, it's not DHB. Sorry, bud.
See, now that's some bullshit.
Anyways, it was awful. And imagine this. I take it to get bigger, but I can't train because I'm taking it due to the post-injection pain. So I'm like, what the hell is this?
But if I have to choose between a douche and a turd, I just don't see the point.
I gotta text my friends, tell them what's going on, how much bullshit this is, and they're like, oh yeah, bro, you just gotta roll it out. You just gotta get a foam roller and roll it out. So here I am at the gym, 21-year-old me, juiced up to the gills, just won my pro card, thinking I'm the shit, literally in the gym, like grunting and moaning on a foam roller, and people are probably looking at me like, what the fuck fuck is wrong with this guy? And of course, I just tell them I have cerebral palsy and move on. But it was miserable. Now, this is just the first incidents. This is just the tip of the iceberg of my experience. Moving forward, fast forward 2-3 weeks. This is quite quick in terms of androgens onsets in their effects. This is really rapid because usually you're waiting 6 to 8 weeks to see any kind of representable change in your physique or experience from taking any form of androgens, especially if it's like a testosterone enanthate, cypionate, or God knows, undecuinate is going to take forever. So in 2 to 3 weeks, I was experiencing some quite abnormal effects. My urine would be like highlighter yellow and kind of like a hue of, unfortunately, like maybe green. I'm not so sure. I would be very aware that like my kidneys were genuinely hurting. And this is the weird thing because at an age of, early 20s, you don't typically expect to have your kidneys hurt. And so initially you think, oh, it's lower back pain. And then you look at an anatomy chart and you see where the kidneys are in the body. And then you're like, okay, well, this isn't necessarily my lower back. It's slightly above my lower back. This is, oh God, this is actually my fucking kidneys. You know what I mean? And so you're doing this and it's like, okay, well, I'm trying to get these massive amount of effects. I'm in constant pain. I'm now, peeing a very weird color. I have hurting in my kidneys. Let's go do some lab work to see what's happening. So I go do lab work. And this is where I was absolutely shocked. And unfortunately, you guys, I don't have copies of this lab work. It's lost in the dust because, again, my youthful self wasn't very responsible in many different ways. I was hardcore military man, ego-driven at that point. So fucking when I read blood work, it was just like, fuck it, I'll never use this again and throw it in the trash, whatever. But I do remember very clearly that for the first time ever, and that was the only time ever, that my ALT and AST were above 100. In fact, they were at around 500 upon testing. This is my 3rd week of taking DHB. My 3rd week. Insane. You might be asking yourself, well, Kolton, you're probably abusing the fucking DHB. You're probably taking way too much. You'd be wrong. I was only taking 150 milligrams of DHB per week, which is a very nominal dose, and pairing that with nothing else, no orals, no ridiculous ancillaries at that point because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just taking 300 milligrams of testosterone. I thought that was a huge cycle, to be honest with you. And my ALT was having those representative numbers. So that was the first red flag. And then I go down to my GFR, my glomerular filtration rate, and I'm absolutely appalled. This shit is in near single digits. I'd never have experienced that in my life before, nor did I know at that period in time that I could test the stat and see to get a further indication of how my actual renal function was doing. But seeing that as someone who's never had poor blood work and who's regularly gotten it done due to the advisement of Vigorous Steve, thank you so much for at least guiding somewhat of my early bodybuilding years, even though I still fucked up a lot. I knew this was very, very, very abnormal. And so I was thinking to myself, weighing the costs and the benefits, and really the benefit was very little. I mean, to be honest with you, I didn't see that much of a change in my physique. I didn't get the vascular expression that a lot of people talked about. I didn't get the fullness that a lot of people talked about. I will say I got a lot stronger very quick. Even with the PIP, working past the pain, my leg press, my squats, my deadlifts, everything went up exponentially. And I'm not talking like a couple of pounds. I'm talking like lifts would go up 100% and quite literally doubling strength in most of my movements within a couple of weeks. But the representative detriments in terms of my serum creatinine, my EGFR, and my liver enzymes or transamerases, it was definitely not worth it. Topple that with the experiences that I had with the PIP and the experiences that I had with like my urination and kidneys hurting, I was extremely concerned at what this was doing to my body. So I took it out. Immediately took it out. After that blood work came through, I read it and I really analyzed what I was doing. I completely removed it, never touched it again, threw it away. 2 weeks later, I got blood work. I was very concerned at this time. I was what you would call maybe a hypochondriac when it came to gear use. I would be over conservative and test myself wildly too regularly. I mean, literally the lab corps people would see me every other week sometimes. But it was kind of a good thing because believe it or not, I had a very nominal ALT AST. I had a very nominal EGFR. I had no abnormal urination, no kidney pain, nothing like that. But in that transient moment where I was taking DHB and I was doing it consistently, there was big fucking issues. And I would highly, highly take note of this, you guys, because it's something that you'll see as a trend upon many people who use DHB, and maybe some of you who have can comment down below and talk about your experiences there as well. Now I won't bullshit the bullshitter. Obviously the shit does something, right?
Shit! Shit indeed.
It has an anabolic potential, and some people have actually done this with very good experiences. When we look at the myriad of research done on several different androgens, just testosterone alone, with over 6 decades of research being done on this stuff, I mean, you have to really scratch your head and be like, okay, I know the end fates of testosterone, I know I get an anabolic effect from it, and I know the anabolic effect is pretty strong. The end fates are very clear as in terms of what's going to happen if you take a high dose of testosterone. When you can just pair it up to that, not even bringing up the other anabolics in this use case, why use something so volatile, so potentially degrading to your health when that is on the table? And for literally a sixth of the price as well. I mean, it's a really hard sell. And personally, as a coach, in my case, I would have never, ever, and nor have I ever used this with any clients. I have never recommended it. I don't think I'll ever have a use case for DHB ever again. Some people might pontificate reasons as to why you could use DHB. I think Alex Kiekel's great at just like pontificating random bullshit about random compounds, talking about how it can save people from heart failure, which is extremely dangerous and could someone very easily file a lawsuit on this man. But there is no use case in my book at all for DHB. And I think it's one of those things that might sound really fancy and you might hear really good stories on the interweb and specifically fucking the degeneracy of Reddit, but you do not need it. In fact, you could just take the milligrams that you'd align to, let's say DHB, 150 milligrams, and put in 500 milligrams of testosterone instead of that 150 milligrams. You'd get a better effect. You'd have a much more higher anabolic potential and still very negligible, innocuous effects to your health. What's to lose at the end of the day? And some people might say again, well, experimentation is how you find out. You have to be your own N=1. You have to do the representative research on yourself because we don't have the research. Fair point. But I would argue that if you're going to push compounds and you're going to be a competitive bodybuilder, you want to do it for the longest time possible, but you also want to get the most results as acutely as possible to shorten the length of your exposure to all drugs in the best of ways. You might want to use something that's safe to do that with, as opposed to something that's highly volatile, non-researched, and you don't know the end fates of. Just food for thought. Let me know what you think down below. Have you taken DHB? What were your experiences? Because I would actually love to use this as sort of my research base. It's one of my favorite things about social media. You guys can tell me exactly what's happened to you in the past, and then I can take that information, coagulate it, and see, okay, if we really look at this population, what's happened to people most often taking things? Like, for example, people say that Masteron doesn't cause hair loss, but I have literally at this point thousands of DMs with people telling me Masteron absolutely causes hair loss. It's a non-negotiable fact that people are losing hair when taking Masteron exorbitantly more than when they're taking something else like testosterone. Anyways, rant done, guys. That's my personal fireside story for you tonight. Hopefully it makes enough sense for you not to take DHB. Dihydrobolidone needs to be crossed off your list forevermore if it isn't already. Thanks, subscribe, like, and if you could, send this to a friend because they might be thinking about taking DHB and they should not.